And we turn now to the new Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. He joins us from Louisville. Mr. Leader, thank you so much for being with us on this first Sunday interview since you became the Majority Leader. You heard Prime Minister Netanyahu. You heard President Obama. What is your take on how all of this is shaking out?
Well, first, a little history. The President was against the sanctions that we passed overwhelmingly that brought the Iranians to the table. And in the last two State of the Union messages, he's threatened to veto additional sanctions. Clearly, the President does not want Congress involved in this issue. We have a couple of bills before the Senate now, one that would require any agreement, if reached, to come to the Senate. There are a number of Democrats who are sponsoring that. They seem not to want to vote on it, but there are a number of Democrats who are sponsoring it. Look, I think we need to, as the Prime Minister pointed out, know who we're dealing with here. The Iranians are fomenting trouble in Syria, in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Yemen, all over the Middle East. They're on the march. They have enhanced influence in Iraq. We can't ignore all of their other behavior in looking at the potential nuclear deal. What we do know about the deal is it looks like it will leave the infrastructure in place with one of the worst regimes in the world. The fact that the President doesn't seem to want Congress to participate in this underscores what a bad deal it is, because I think he's afraid that we might not approve it. So I'm very worried about it, and I hope that the President will not make the bad deal that we all anticipate he is going to make.
Well, if a deal is reached, will you insist that the Senate approve it as it would were it a treaty?
Yes. The chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee has a proposal that has at least 10 Democratic co-sponsors that would require the deal to come before Congress for approval. Now, the President's threatened to veto that. He doesn't want us to have any role to play in this, but I'm hoping we can get 67 senators to assert the historic role of the Senate and the Congress in looking at matters of this magnitude. Obviously, the President doesn't want us involved in this, but he's going to need us if he's going to lift any of the existing sanctions. And so I think he cannot work around Congress forever. I'm glad the Prime Minister came. We needed to hear from somebody to point out the problems with the deal that we anticipate will be made, and also to point out that you shouldn't ignore all Iran's other behavior unrelated to their nuclear program, fomenting revolution all over the Middle East. They have built IEDs that have killed and injured a number of our personnel. This is a very, very dangerous regime.
The Justice Department, Senator, is preparing to file charges, as you know, against New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez, alleging that he accepted gifts and trips in exchange for political favors for a longtime friend. Do you think he should step aside now as the top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee?
Well, apparently no charges have been brought yet, but typically when these kinds of charges are brought, people step aside from their leadership positions for a pendency of time. But that will be up to the Democratic leader, Senator Reid, to make that call.
Do you believe Hillary Clinton, speaking of former Democratic senators, do you believe that former Secretary Clinton violated any law by opening this private email account on her home server?
Honestly, I'm not sure, but I am a little bit worried about the security of those emails. They would have been prime targets for cyber attacks, but I don't know what the law is. I think the administration is taking a look at that, and hopefully we'll find out in the coming weeks just what the legal situation is with regard to that.
Yesterday down in Selma, the President made an impassioned plea to Congress to restore the Voting Rights Act. Mm-hmm. Will you support that?
Well, the Voting Rights Act is still intact. It prevents discrimination in the voting behavior all across America based on race. The Supreme Court took out a portion of it. We're taking a look at that. Certainly it was an important occasion. Bob, just interestingly enough, I was a young man in 1965 visiting one of my senators from Kentucky, and he took me over to the rotunda, and I actually saw Lyndon Johnson sign the Voting Rights Act, and that was, of course, 4 or 5 months after Bloody Sunday. It has been an extraordinarily important piece of legislation. It prevents discrimination in voting on the basis of race all over America, and we all revere the changes that have been brought in our country as a result of this important legislation.
Let me just ask you one final question here, and that is, now that you are the majority leader in the Senate, do you feel you are obligated to work with the President and with the White House to get things done?
Well, of course. And I think there's some areas that I'm pretty optimistic about. I think we're going to be able to make progress on trade. I think we're going to be able to make progress on cybersecurity. You know, when the American people elect divided government, they're not saying they don't want anything done. They're saying, we want you guys on each side to look for things that you can agree on to make progress for the country, and that's always my first choice.
Quick question. Treasury Secretary Lew sent a letter to Congress last week saying the debt limit will reach the ceiling Monday. Are Republicans going to vote to lift the debt ceiling?
Well, the debt ceiling will be handled over a period of months. The Secretary of the Treasury has a number of what we call tools in his toolbox. I made it very clear after the November election, we're certainly not going to shut down the government or default on the national debt. We'll figure some way to handle that, and hopefully it might carry some other important legislation that we can agree on in connection with it.
All right. Mr. Majority Leader, thank you so much for giving us your first interview as Majority Leader. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Bob.